Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th Lido Node Operator Community Call. Thanks for tuning in at our revised kind of schedule, not in terms of time, but in terms of period of the month. We're going to try to do these calls a little bit earlier in the month instead of towards the end. The primary reason being basically to be able to give you updates around what are the cool things that contributors have been working on over the last month, which brings us to our first agenda item, which is value stream updates with Sasha. Then we're going to go into CSM Testnet updates with Dima, rounding out all of the news around Lido staking router modules with a simple DVT update with Will, who's going to tell us a lot about the simple DVT expansion proposal. And following that, we're going to have an analytics presentation with Max and Alex, and then a pre-recorded segment about the incident that happened with Numic, pre-recorded due to the time zones. But any questions that are asked by the chat will be conveyed to the node operator out on the forums, and we'll provide a link at the end where everybody can go see those answers. So without further ado, let's go to our first and new rolling segment, value stream updates. Take it away, Sash.
Hey everyone, I'm Sasha, contributor to Lido. So I was honored to cover the monthly updates of the validator set value stream in this call. It is basically a section that we as Lido contributors intend to have at the beginning of each node operator community call, just in order to keep the broader community updated regarding the major stuff happened over the past month. I personally know how hard it is to keep up with everything happening in crypto space, and we've decided to make this part a bit easier for all of you, at least when it comes to Lido. To be clear, within this section, we are covering not all the Lido protocol updates. For this purpose, there is a broader section on the Lido block. But at the beginning of this year, we've started putting together node operators related updates on the node operator portal that you can see over here. And the updates are over here. So getting closer to the point, May updates. Here we go. This month started with the proposal published by Hasu regarding the recent changes in the overall strategy for the Lido DAO. And the general idea is that the direction itself for the Lido DAO should remain the same in terms of efforts focused on decentralization. And as it is stated in the very first point within the updated goals, it says literally stay focus on security and decentralization. And there are several points that clarify this direction, mostly given the recent market changes with regard to MVI and restaking. So the second point, the Lido DAO should participate in Ethereum staking roadmap research and keep contributing to an endgame vision for Ethereum staking to help protect against centralization and all the risk that it entails. The next point is to reaffirm that STs should remain an LST. So, obviously, the DAO should react to market changes, and in this case, the DAO should stay open to launching additional products on top of STs, and it might be an LRT, for instance, when it's reasonable and when it's aligned with the Lido mission. However, STs in and of itself should always stay an LST. So the Lido DAO should support Ethereum-aligned validator services, starting with pre-confirmation, because it's the most anticipated thing that is going to happen. And in other words, that means that the DAO should explore and react to new services when there is obvious that they will be launched, and is a strong indication that all of the validators, or at least the majority of validators, will adopt them anyway. And the last point is that STs has an opportunity to remain the top collateral used in the restaking protocols. In the same time, giving STs holders the ability to opt into additional points of like on the risk or like rewards. An important note here that they should like want to do it themselves. So that's why the effort of the Lido DAO should be focused on making STs the #1 collateral in the risk-taking market. That's it for this section, and next section is about the updates for validator and node operator metrics. So the latest Venom report for Q1 2024 went out with, I would say, like one of the main highlights that reflects node operators' effort over the first 3 months of the year in terms of usage of supermajority execution layer client that went from 67 to 46%, if I recall correctly, which is like quite significant. So next up, update on security incident happened on May 14th. I won't dive into it since we'll have a dedicated section, as Izzy mentioned, for it later within this call. But I will just sum up that the incident has been resolved and has not resulted in validator separations being affected or any loss of funds for the protocol. Getting further. So it's been a while since Lido contributors published the RFP, which stands for Request for Proposal, that seeks for the software providers to integrate simple DVT module and community staking module into their tools. The first batch of the proposals for simple DVT module was approved a bit earlier, since simple DVT goes a bit ahead of CSM in terms of development. And the integration for the simple DVT is now being tested with new cohorts onboarded. In terms of the updates for May specifically, the LEGO committee reviewed all the proposals for CSM integration and decided to allocate grants for to 3 of them, namely proposals from DevNode, from Nethermind, and from Sterum. These teams have already started working on integrations, aiming to have them done in a form of like MVP version by mid-July. Next update is about current progress with regard to Community Lifeguard Initiative. So Community Lifeguards have proposed the the new framework of collaboration with the DAO, establishing a subcommittee that can allocate small community grants aimed at fostering community. So if you are interested in any form of community growth collaboration, definitely check out the recent proposal that is linked over here. And the other work that have been done by the Community Lifeguard over the past month is a number of workshops, offline ones, and small events in the local Asian and Latin communities that you can also check over here. Okay, the last topic before I leave this stage. The first solo staking event in Brussels, hosted by Lido, where we will be showcasing different ways for solo stakers to join the Lido node operator set. The number of tickets is of course limited, and to sign up for this event you'll need a special invite code, as we say here. And now we are going to do a really quick giveaway of these tickets. So if you'll be in Brussels on July 11th and you'd want to join this event, follow the link that we'll post, or maybe already posted, I don't know, I asked Izzy. And the first 5 people who'll sign up will get tickets to the event. Ta-da! Be fast. Next up we'll have module updates. I will not cover this section since, again, they will be William and Dmitry later on who will cover these 2 topics, and I'm too scared to compete with them for the fame in this call. So the only thing I want you to know is that these module updates are always here. Super short, as you can see, super comprehensible, and waiting for you starting from the beginning of each month on the node operator portal. And That's it. Thank you for your kind attention. See you next month.
Thank you very much, Sash. I think there's a problem with the YouTube chat allowing me to post the link, but we'll figure that out within the next segment. In the meantime, everybody, please welcome Dima, who's going to give us an update on CSM Testnet.
Hello, everyone. Dima is here. So, CSM Testnet is close. That's real. And you're probably wondering, what should you expect from the testnet? Well, several amazing things. First of all, it's a great chance to make CSM better by testing it as hard as you can, because the only way to really test an on-chain product is to allow users to use it, to break it, to try to break it, and hopefully never break so that it will go straight to mainnet. It is an exciting opportunity to learn how easy it is to use CSM compared to the other protocols allowing solo stakers to participate in. And it is a unique moment to get your CSM mainnet EA ticket. But what is EA? EA stands for early adoption. And the early adoption list is a list of heroes who will get a discounted first validator in terms of bond and a chance to join CSM from day one on a mainnet. Sounds amazing, isn't it? But how to become an EA member? There's several ways. The first one is to participate in a public CSM testnet and demonstrate decent performance. The second is to participate in Lido events, both online and offline, and claim Galaxy odds associated with these events. Once you will have 5 or more points on Lido Galaxy campaign, you will be eligible to join early adoption. The next thing is you can be an Obol Technique credential holder, and in this case, you are already in the list. And the final and the most exciting and amazing thing, you can just be a proven solo staker included either in the rated list or in the list provided by StakeCat, namely specifically list B, which stands for high confidence. While the first condition is unique for mainnet because, you cannot participate in testnet before testnet. The latest 3 ones, namely Galaxy odds, Obol Technique credentials, and being just a solo staker, are already used for the early adoption list on a testnet. So without further ado, scan the QR code on the screen and go to the special widget that we've prepared for you to check if you are in the early adoption list. And if you are, you will be able to join CSM Testnet from the day one. If you are not, don't worry. Keep in mind the points from the previous slide and make sure to fulfill at least one of them to join mainnet. And the final mainnet list will be proposed to the Lido DAO somewhere in September or October 2024. So we are moving to the final question. When testnet? And I'm thrilled to announce that testnet for early adopters will be live starting from July 1st, 2024. And for everyone in a permissionless way, it will become available late July 2024. With that said, see you on a testnet, and thank you so much.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to having fun on the CSM testnet with everybody. All right, next up, our second module update of the day. Will is going to tell us about the new developments in Simple DBT.
Hey everyone. So I'm Will, I'm contributor in the non-work stream of Lido DAO and doing the monthly Simple DBT module update. As you can see by the status that we update every month, we've got a pretty cool announcement this month because we are expanding. So last week, there was a snapshot vote that successfully passed. You can see that on the right side of the screen that accepts the plans and the proposal to expand the Simple DBT module. This expansion covers two major components. So first, it allows for the creation of super simple DBT clusters. So these are clusters that basically can run a larger number of validators, and they're going to be composed of advanced node operators, which I will touch on in a moment, along with members of the curated set, both of which have already been approved via the DAO discussion period following the proposal in the simple DBT module. And then the second component is increasing the maximum share limit of the module to 4% from the current 0.5%. And so increasing the share limit to 4% will allow for two different things. First, it'll allow for the creation of 10 super clusters. This will be 5 OBOL clusters, 5 SSV clusters, and these clusters will be able to run about 500 validators each. That equates to around 2% of the share limit. And then the other 2% will be used for the onboarding of 72 regular clusters. When I say regular clusters, these are the normal simple DBT clusters that have been going through the onboarding process. So it'll be at around 36 OBOL, 36 SSV clusters. And these clusters will have the potential to run around 80 validators. So that 80 validator number is somewhat flexible. It very much depends on the total amount of stake within the Lido protocol. So it could be a bit more, it could be a bit less. What this will allow within these normal clusters is for the onboarding of around 250 to 325 net new node operators to the protocol in 2024. And so that's an increase from the original expectations of 200. It's possible it could be a bit higher, but I think that's a fairly safe range. But in general, this will allow for participants in these normal clusters to earn a sufficient amount of rewards to make sure that the participation in simple DBT is worth it over the long term. It'll allow for many new node operators, including tons of solo and community stakers, to also participate within the protocol. In terms of these super clusters and the advanced node operators, so advanced node operators will be determined following the Lido node operator subgovernance group proposal. This will include the proposed clusters for these super clusters, so the makeup of those clusters. And generally, these participants will be professional node operators, but it's not exclusive to professional node operators. The potential for solo stakers to be included is still there as well. Over time, and so the advanced node operator classification was actually outlined in the initial simple DBT module proposal. And it basically says that any cluster that runs over 100 validators needs to have 50% of the constituents be made up of advanced node operators. And so it's over time, I believe that we'll see like more holistic representation across clusters of advanced node operators, but the first proposal will just cover the super clusters. So lots of exciting things here happening within simple DBT. The plan from here is really to start scaling this, which we're going to touch on in a moment as I talk about OBOL and the performance report, but SSV as well, and really get a significant amount of stake running through simple DBT across many, many different participants using the protocol. So I touched on this, and we have 2 slides to cover this, but the initial performance report related to OBOL clusters has now been published. The performance showed very strong performance across all of the metrics with one caveat. So initially there was an issue with block proposals. This basically occurred over the first 4 days of validators being active. It was noted that there was a misconfiguration error within the majority of Lodestar configs for those in net. So over 2 days, the flag that was missing for the use v3 block produce was updated to false. During that 48-hour period, one block was also missed because the cluster had one of the clusters had not finished updating. So a total of 5 blocks were missed during this 4-day period. But since May 7th, the block proposal success rate is actually 100%, and we'll show you the numbers in the next slide. What this means is that there's now a DAO discussion period that's open to raise the key limits for cohort 1 of OBOL to 40 validators. This will happen in a phased approach. So there will initially be a key limit raise to 20 validators. We'll make sure that the validators activate without issues and then raise key limits to 40 validators. And it also includes the proposal to raise the initial cohort 2 key limits to 5 validators each. So cohort 2 has started to onboard. They're in the process of getting forms filled out and making sure that their nodes are up and running, but key limits won't be raised until this discussion period is successfully completed. So definitely check out the simple DBT module proposal thread on the forums if you'd like to weigh in and leave any feedback. In terms of OBOL testnet number 4, so it's underway with 25 clusters. There's 150 plus net new node operators participating. There has been a bit of an issue because of a couple of things. It really relates to the high number of inactive keys. This is the first testnet where we're running 1,000 keys per cluster. The large number of Haleski validators, and these are all interacting with a issue with Lighthouse for inactive keys. The fix for this issue is actually rolled out today. So we're going to start pushing that to clusters later on this week, and we'd expect to raise key limits and get the majority of clusters active this week. We do have 2 clusters that are active that weren't having these issues, and performance looks good. So on the next call, we should have some good news to share regarding testnet number 4. Here you can look a little more in depth in terms of the first month and 4-day performance for OBO cohort 1 clusters. So you can see by cluster and then the aggregates at the bottom. I'll really focus on the aggregates here, but the average uptime was 99.95% versus the entire mainnet network uptime of 99.69% over the last 30 days from June 6th. Average validator effectiveness of 96.48 versus 96.39. So these Lido X OBO clusters actually surpassed all of the mainnet averages. Block proposal success rate aggregate was 74%. As a reminder, the minimum for testnet was 70%. And given the 100% success rate since the fix was implemented, I feel very comfortable with this number continuing to trend higher. And in general, I think things look really, really good here. So hoping that the discussion period goes through without any issues, and that we have 26 OBO clusters running on mainnet within the next few weeks, in addition to many more validators being active online via SimpleDBT through OBO. And very exciting. So I think on the last call, we talked about how the SSV clusters had surpassed all of the testnet benchmarks. So mainnet onboarding is now underway. All but 1 cluster has completed the and address verification stages. That should be posted to the forum tomorrow for public transparency. The operators here are in the process of setting up their SSV operators, and we'd expect DKGs to start by early next week. The additions to the node operator registry are expected to be staged later today or potentially tomorrow morning. This will kick off the normal 72-hour veto period for LDO holders. But basically, by the end of this week, you should see the SSV clusters, their node operator entries, at least represented on mainnet via the SimpleDBT module. Similar to OBO, the initial key limits will start at 5 validators for each of these 12 clusters. That'll be followed by the 30-day monitoring period, and then a performance report will be shared with the DAO. And if things look good, we'll raise key limits here again and also onboard the cohort 2 SSV clusters. One last note. So the application deadline for the next SimpleDBT testnet with SSV is tomorrow. If you're a solo staker, community staker, interested in applying, if you are a participant participating in the current OBO testnet or participating in a prior OBO testnet and would like to participate, feel free to apply. There's probably a little bit of flexibility here on the date if you are interested in applying and can't make it by tomorrow. If that's the case, please reach out to nom@lido.fi, nom@lido.fi, and we can discuss if there's any way to squeeze you in. But thanks so much. That's it for me.
Let's stick on the slide for a second, since I see a question in the chat, and hopefully I'll be able to get this correct because it's a little bit succinct. Irina T from Everstake is asking, what's the sum of proposed negative blocks, or I'm guessing like missed blocks, where I guess we had the issue in the beginning of the the mainnet run of cohort 1.
It was a total of 5 missed blocks out of 19.
5 out of 19. Okay. So that puts us just above 70% effectiveness around block proposals right now, and 100% since the fixes were rolled out on the client configurations.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Irina, I hope that covered the question that you were asking. If not, feel free to just clarify in the chat, and we'll either get back to it a little bit later or answer in the chat. Thank you. I don't see any following questions. So with that, thank you, Will, for the update on SimpleDBT. And next up, we have a really, really quick intermission while Max and Alex prepare to tell us a little bit more about how Max EB portends to affect validator rewards in the near future. But yeah, until then, really, really quick intermission with kind of like a cool thing for the rest of you. Max, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Hello, thank you. And thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm Max. Alex couldn't make it for this call, but like the work put into this analysis and presentation is impressive on this side. But I will be doing the talking. So today I'm gonna talk about the upcoming possible increase in max effective balance and its effect on rewards and risk from the perspective of the protocol and perspective from the whole validators as whole a little bit. And my presentation would be focused on like duality between compounding rewards as an effect of increasing the possible effective balance to like 2K48 is, and some risks involved under the hood, which was like highlighted in research by Dapline, but and enhanced a little bit from our side in terms of the effect on slashing, the most common slashing, the attestation double vote, and how using basically huge validators could increase the risk of like not the risk, but the expected value of slashing that is happening. So the focus would be on this duality, and like the research is basically of how can different configuration between 32 and 2K48 ETH validators result in terms of rewards, depending on like the APR, CL, and EL network rewards, depending on skimming time or partial withdrawal time, which is a function of total validator set size and the validator queue or gas price. And on the risk side, it's dependent on like reaction time for the incident if that happened, and the divergent rate, that's the rate of the slots that have different view on the chain and would lead to violation of double attestation in case of validator performing this violation and detected. And like the first part, the left part is the rewards view. So like the general idea is pretty straightforward, like compounding is cool, and like compounding could increase the rewards in very long period of time. Like this graph is for 30 years, which is like extremely high, but to like represent the idea. However, on like short-term perspective, we're basically speaking about like 3% of 3%, assuming like the perfect sense of daily compounding for this. And the second point I want to highlight here, like we are not living in a world where compounding is impossible at all. For example, for the protocol, it's already implemented with like skimming and using the ETH generated within new validators running. So let's go with estimation of like how exactly moving the size of validators and utilizing the feature of like basically validator growing by itself and increasing incremental reward could affect the rewards. And like on the first, again, super basic sense, yes, the compounding brings additional value in terms of rewards, and on really long perspective, like 10 years, it could be around like 17%, like from the validators starting from 32 ETH, which could be utilized now with existing skimming. For example, with Steph, you can build like basically the hedging process, utilizing the rewards generated every 60 days and paying the transaction fee and like the share for the node operator and the DAO, but the effect would be the same. And on the general huge level, on the like protocol level, trying to find the optimal solution in terms of the validators, because like increasing the validators balance decrease the amount of time it needs to basically increase the incremental reward and utilize the ETH to participate in the rewards. We've like built a model and tweaked with different parameters. One of them is APR, another is like current skimming cycle, the like amount of time it needs to get the rewards generated from the validator. The validator affects the balance as a control variable, and enter Q and gas price as the variables representing the environment, as like the longer the enter Q and greater the gas prices, the lower the effectiveness of the current skimming when like there's all of the validators at 32 ETH and the rewards are just collected and used for starting new validators. And basically the results like represents the existing logic of like we are not comparing compounding with nothing, but comparing compounding with already pretty precise method of like including the ETH to participating in consensus reaching mechanism. So basically the effect of APR in like normal condition without like constant huge pressure in terms of validator queue or without like abnormal prices on gas are almost like non-existent. And the peculiar thing is like if compounding is utilized, it should be utilized on like really huge validators, like above 1,700 ETH, because that's the size, reducing the amount of time to get this ETH for participating in consensus level lower than 8.5 days that it's required for skimming for the like sizable protocol who can utilize the rewards from multiple 32 ETH validators to start up the new validators. Even in harsh conditions, like with 20K validators in the queue and with abnormal prices for the gas and the transaction for starting the new validators, like the increase in the rewards is like almost insignificant. It's like 0.002 additional APR due to compounding. Again, because we're not comparing compounding with nothing, we're comparing compounding with the current process, which works quite well. And the recap here, again, just from the rewards perspective, like in a realistic scenario, the additional amount of rewards in APR is like almost insignificant and requires consolidating to like huge amount of validators to like outpace the current skimming cycle of 8.5 ETH, which could increase with the number of validators, but could decrease if like after the consolidation would be available, we would observe actual reduction in number of validators, but not the amount of stake ETH. And this is a tool that could be utilized in more harsh market conditions or like staking conditions, but right now there is no like obvious incentives to use compounding rewards on like huge protocol level and on solo staking level. Of course, it's a good solution, but on the really long perspective and with possible hedge within like different staking providers or different DeFi protocols. And like the research is here. Feel free to come share and put some comments if you want. And moving on to like second part of the first view is the risks around this. There are like a bunch of assumptions here, but basically the whole idea is based on like the most common violation for slashing, which is double attestation, and the fact that it doesn't happen immediately on all of the validators performing double attestation. It requires the conditions on the network for the slot in which a validator was double attesting. So as an example of this, you can run your validator on 2 different machines and you wouldn't be slashed immediately. It would require the assignment for this divergence loan, which are observed at around 4 to 1%. And this whole idea is like well documented and described by Deadline in the link above. So the further insights are like additional layer on this in terms of how it would actually affect the scale of the protocol, for example. So again, the idea is like having multiple validators running on the same host compared to like the one huge validator running of the same host is sacrificing like the variant canary, because if these validators or this host is running on 2 different machines, for example, or 2 different instances, the slashing wouldn't happen immediately. It would happen gradually. And if it's just one validator, you would know when this validator would be slashed. And the indication effect here that if you have that within multiple validators on the same host, the problem could be absorbed with slashing of only part of them and mitigated with nuking the cluster, for example. And like the math behind this is like basically the idea that this observation is conditional probability. Like if you run like 500 or 100 validators on the same host, how much of them would be slashed initially within this divergent slot? And the idea is pretty simple. Like there are 32 slots, and generally they would be distributed by these slots equally, with like expected value within each slot of number of validators divided by 32. But as we're speaking about condition, when this slot is also happen to be divergent slot, there comes like this additional part of the equation, which basically represents the idea that if you have 1 or 2 validators, you would observe like 1 validator slashed or 2 in a bad condition. But if you have lots of validators, the expected value of share of the slashed validators is asymptotically leading to the expected non-conditional value of 132. And the form of this curve is that way that like the most major impact is on the side of consolidating from like 100 to 1 or to 50 or to 10 validators, and consolidating from 500 to 100 validators, for example, increases the expected value of first observed slashing, but the actual increase is like around 1.5%. And this is the standard deviation of share of slashed, like the volatility number, and it's like curved within the form, which could be an additional insight for managing the risk in terms of like the effect that could happen. But like just observing the slashing is not enough. The like actual mitigation comes from the reaction, like the possibility to nuke the cluster before basically all of the validators that are subjective to double attestation violation would be reported and slashed. And investigating how this time depends within different network conditions shows like that the divergent rate, like the basic idea, the greater the divergent rate, the more slots would be lead to slashing reporting for validators. So the less sensitivity of number of validators is observed within every of reaction time, because like, basically that's the time you're racing against the network. And if the divergent rate is like 20%, like there is some sensitivity, but in these 10 epochs, almost all of the validators would be subjected to slashing. Like if it's 1 day, it doesn't depend on most of the divergent rates, how validators are consolidated, because all of them would be subjected to slashing. But with like divergent rate of 1%, which is kind of the low side of observed divergent rate right now, there is still the dependency on the consolidation principle. And like the second, again, quite obvious impact, that like consolidation impacts the expected value and impacts differently on different sizes of the consolidation on the same host. But the reaction time is like incredibly crucial, especially like on the low side, because if you go within the reaction time in terms of like around 1 day, that means that this like canary effect wouldn't provide additional risk mitigation, but like going to from 1 hour to 20 minutes in terms of reaction time could lead to almost triple decrease in terms of EV of like share of the validator slashed at the moment. And like scaling up a little bit, scaling down, sorry, a little bit, because we're speaking like on the hosts running like 200, 100, 500 validators. In terms of like lower number of validators, in this example for like for 256 ETH of capital, the effect of like consolidation is more severe because of the like function of conditional probability. Within 1 hour reaction, having like 8 validators mean that during this 1 hour, like it's expected to slash only 20% of them, and then you can nuke the cluster and reconfigure what's going on, why is it happening. Whether if it's one validator, you get slashed, and you like doesn't have this additional mitigation with double attestation only on divergence side. But of course, if we're moving to like longer reaction time, the effect is still persists. It's always here, but reduces to like much smaller scale, and with higher divergent rate. Again, like with the most like gruesome scenario, there is no impact on the number of validators running. But if there is a commitment to like faster reaction, there is still a reasonable incentive to not consolidate all of your validators to one, but run them separately, considering like the most common risk, the risk of double attestation violation. So recap here, like is basically like purely from mass perspective, and again focusing only on double attestation violation. Consolidating validators running on the same host is like would increase expected value of share of slashed validators in any case, but given that the perspective is greater, decreasing number of validators is not so significant when we're speaking about numbers like decreasing to 100 or 50 validators on the same host. But if we're going to like 1 to 10 validators on the same host, the effect is really, really impactful. And the reaction time is like determining factor is like if reaction time is high enough, it doesn't matter how the structure of validators on the same host is formed, because all of them would be slashed during the high reaction time. If there is a commitment for like lower reaction time within like current observed divergent ratio of the network, it is there are strong incentives to keep basically small validators rather than consolidating them to one and running one validator on the one host. So going on with like the recap of recaps, there is two sides of this talk on rewards and risks, and again, not covering all of the possible consequences for the network, for example, but it's important to have a clear review on like the most prominent ones, the rewards. The effect is like almost non-existent, no matter how configuration is optimized. And on the risk sides, consolidation of validators could be done given the other reasons for do this, with like reasonable increase in risk in terms of like 1 or 1.5% in expected value for attestation happening. But for like lower amount of validators on the same host, it would drastically reduce the mitigation that exists currently. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max, for that really, really extensive analysis. When can we look forward to seeing the details on the forum so we can try to go through it?
I mean, there are like three nodes on HackMD right now, but let's put it together on the forum and do this. I think like next week. Why not? Just to like consolidate all the information.
Awesome, thank you. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to move on to the last segment of today's community call, which is once again a pre-recorded segment from Numic, which is the node operator that had a security incident a couple of weeks ago. The purpose of the segment is for them to give a summary of the incident and also answer some questions that we provided to them ahead of time, as well as to allow any viewers to ask any questions that they might have. Feel free to throw these questions into the chat. And we will then take these questions and add them to the incident forum post so that the node operator can respond. DJ, hit play.
Hi everyone, I'm Frank from Numic, and today we're going to talk about a recent security incident. I would like to run through what caused that, what our architecture looks like, and what learnings we can draw from it. What happened is that a developer computer got infected with a malware. The source of the malware was a website which tried to impersonate the official vendor website. It was probably pushed up through search engine optimization in the ranking or through sponsoring, and then was able to spread the malware. We discovered this infection the next day through a suspicious login attempt. And through the user account of this login attempt, you could immediately trace back from which computer the infection must have come. The validation operation was not affected throughout the incident, as they are completely separate and specially secured. Now that the malware was on the computer, it had access to browser passwords, files, but also to files on a mounted backup volume. It was mounted on that day to run a backup towards the backup server. On this volume, there were also encrypted key files. The malware would not be able to access the files inside the encrypted container, but it could see the containers. Why do we need to have the key files on this backup server? This is the reason lies in our architecture. So per cluster, we use one key manager server. And this means that in the case of a failure of this key manager server, we need to manually be able to transfer the keys from the backup to the failover key server. Theoretically, there would also be ways to automate this process, but experience shows that in the past there have been node operators who deployed automatic solutions, and in some cases those have resulted in slashings. That was not necessarily with Lido, but we are aware of such cases, and we definitely did want to take a risk for that. So we said we want to have a manual process for the key transfer. After discovering the infection, we dug a bit deeper, and we especially investigated the last access timestamps of files on the infected drive. And what we saw was that there was a huge amount of files that had been accessed within a short time window during the infection. It was just a 2-minute time window. And we could see that files on the backup server were also last accessed within this short time window, indicating that if the malware was responsible for this access, it might have accessed files on the backup volume. We don't think that files were downloaded during this time because 2 minutes is just too short. It would just barely be enough to create an index or maybe not even a scan of those files. Plus, the key files were still in their encrypted container, so could not have been accessed. Anyway, we informed the Lido DAO contributors upon this discovery, and together with them, we decided to rotate our validators out to keys from other node operators just to avoid any risk. And to facilitate this process, we needed to exit the validators. As there was no reason to do this immediately, we spaced the process of exiting the validators out over the next 3 days and sent batches of exit messages every 12 hours. The advantage of this was that we did not clog up the Ethereum exit queue with our exit messages. Speaking generally, how can we prevent a cyber attack? So we need layers of protection, but no layer of protection is perfect. There will always be some holes in this Swiss cheese model. And what we want to do is we want to have as many layers as possible. And we want to look how we can reduce and tighten the holes in the current model. Specifically for us, this means that we should move to a distributed key manager. In this case, we don't have a single instance, but we would have, for example, a 2 out of 3 model where we run 3 computers who hold key shards, and a signer now would need to obtain signatures from at least 2 out of these 3 key managers. The advantage is that on the one hand, we have a higher reliability, which means if one of those key server fails, we do not have to immediately access the key files from the backup to move them to a failover server. And secondly, an attacker would not be able to get the keys from one of those servers. So an attacker would always need to gain control over at least 2 of these servers to put back together the keys from those key shards. And yeah, the advantage would be that our key backup could be offline permanently and thus dramatically reduce the attack vector. And more generally, we also just want to add more cheese slices wherever we see fit. When we talk about improving security, we can also mention the Lido Duck initiative here. So through this initiative recently, a Git book has been released that deals with the risks node operators face, as well as mitigations we can take. And there are risks like downtime or slashing, but there's also risks that are not as obvious. For example, maliciously acting employees. So I think this book can equip us with ideas to create more layers of cheese and can be a good starting point to generally improve security. It is available for free directly under this URL, and I encourage everybody to have a look there. On top of that, we're also working with an information security consultancy. They are called MSDD. We've met several times so far and have worked out 18 recommendations to bring our processes more in line with ISO 27001. So this is an internationally recognized standard for securely managing information. Immediately after the infection, they advised us that merely freshly installing the infected machine is maybe not enough, that there's still a risk the malware could have spread to somewhere else in the network or on other drives. So we freshly installed absolutely all machines, changed all credentials, all encryption keys, absolutely everything, so that there could be no lingering risk. As mentioned before, a distributed key manager could solve one of the root problems. So we have already completed the move to a distributed DIRC, in our case a 3 out of 5 model, and so now these signing keys can be held offline permanently. MSDD advised in terms of encryption for business critical files to use encryption keys with 32 character length. It sounds a bit overkill, but they said at the same time there is no downside if you use a password manager for those keys anyway. And the password manager themselves should better be secured through biometrics instead of a password. Biometrics is still a bit challenging as Linux has notoriously support, for example, for fingerprint scanners, but yeah, that's in the works. And the last big chunk is a security information and event management software. So this is a software you can use, for example, for anomaly detection, intrusion detection, detailed logging. We have rolled that out on all nodes, but the task doesn't end there because this software still needs to be more properly set up, tested, fine-tuned, there's still work to do. Yeah, and then I would like to close with a quote by a former FBI director. Last year, for example, 3/4 of American businesses reported that they have been targeted by a cyber attack, and only 1/4 of American businesses at the same time had strong passwords and two-factor authentication in place. So everybody who thinks that their infrastructure security is sufficient and that they already have enough layers of cheese, I would ask them to think again. Thank you.
Okay. I think by now the pre-recorded segment has finished on the live stream. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I actually don't see any questions right now in the chat, but if you do have any, feel free to jump on the research.lido.fi forums. There is a forum topic on this that's actually, I'm gonna find the link and throw it in the chat really quickly. So feel free to post any questions that you might have there around the incident or to the node operator in general. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Our next community call will probably be around the 3rd week of July. As the 2nd week of July, we will be in Brussels for ETHCC. Hope to see a lot of you there, especially at the Stakers Guild community staking event. Thank you and see you next month.